I'm Dane Rose, and what I want to talk about in this video is the experience of being absolutely certain that the path that we're on and the path that we are behaving in a way to create is going to lead to disaster. So we're on a train track, and there's a brick wall that we're going to hit, and we know it, and we're piling on more power. Now, if you've ever been in this situation, one of the panics going through your mind is, what am I doing? I know this is the absolute wrong thing to say. What am I doing? I don't even want this. But I've got to continue to make some kind of point so as not to fill in the blank. I've got to continue. I don't want this. I don't want this. It's horrible. I know how it's going to end. And I'm doing the very thing that is the worst possible thing. And I can't stop. How do you know you can't stop? You don't. That's how. What I'm getting at is, you may look at it on a left lineal brain level and say, wait a minute, I'm the one pressing the accelerator here, so I could press in the brake. But if you do the full equation and say, I know it's going where I don't want to go, I know I'm doing it, and it's getting worse, and I'm going to have to suffer where I don't want to go, and I'm making it worse, and I could change it, but I don't seem to be changing it. There's a flaw in this equation, meaning that people do act in what they perceive to be their interest. You do, I do, etc. So the missing piece is, what is it about this momentum that is more in our interest than the enormous price we're paying to crash this train into the wall? What's so valuable to us that's not being spoken about that makes this train collision a given, even though we're in control? And I want to talk about it like this. I want to say that there are emotional weights in the shadow, in the partitioned arena of the psyche, in the dissociated areas of our consciousness. Horrifically terrifying, lonely, overwhelming, painful events, shaming events that were too big for us at a childhood age, number one, and that we are ill-equipped with as emotionally illiterate adults. It just means none of us got any emotional training in high school other than how to pretend we weren't feeling, which is not training, it's shaming. And so you have this enormous weight, let's say a 1-ton weight, and it's too heavy for the individual. But we have a little trick that we play, and it's a trick that our eye, our little flashlight, can only turn in one direction at a time. So we can shine it over here, then we can shine it over here. Now when we get close to this huge 1-ton unresolved emotional trauma, we shine it away. We turn the light away. But there are some situations in which we've got to face this 1-ton trauma in order, not to be absurd. And this is when we go to drastic measures. So what I want to suggest is that any time you are technically in control, meaning your mind says it's my hand doing it, supposedly I'm in control of my hand, but your hand is doing the very thing that you think mentally is creating a disaster, I want you to think to yourself that what's actually going on is that the reality is getting close to one of these enormous emotional traumas, an overwhelming emotional experience that you do not know how to deal with alone, number one, that you have no support for, that you have little awareness and skill to deal. And rather than face this horrific emotional trauma alone, maybe it's a feeling of helplessness, maybe it's a memory, maybe it's a feeling of rage that covers the helplessness because it's such a debilitating experience to feel helpless. Every time you get near it, you get really angry and just rage at things so that you don't feel the helplessness. That every time you get near here, you will do something so outlandish and bizarre that it pushes all the attention that was going to go into this felt experience up here and swings it back around here. For example, as soon as you grasp the idea that you're about to crash into a concrete wall on a train, all your attention now is driven to the crash. What am I going to do? How am I going to fix it? And once you crash, you have a new trauma to pay attention to, and you've avoided looking at this helplessness over here. Now, there's a couple of implications with this. I used to get furious at the irrationality of women in romantic relationship because every single woman that I dated had some area where they were irrational. But it got worse. It wasn't just that they were irrational, driving into a brick wall. They were irrational about the irrationality. So I'd say, wait a minute. You're doing this, and you're doing this, which accelerates you towards this. Are you following me? Well, okay, maybe. I say, but you say you don't want to hit into this concrete wall. You following me so far? Not really. See, this is where we get into irrationality. It's like, is that a concrete wall? Oh, I don't want to talk about that. Are you about to hit it? Let's not be negative. They would, so there'd be this bizarre conversation in which I would watch them drive right into a concrete wall, and I would tell them a running commentary. Okay, you're getting closer, you're going to hit it in about 2 hours now. Hit it. Okay, you've hit it. So now that you've hit it, and they would burst open with emotion, and it was very clear to me that they did not feel responsible for the actions they had taken, and that no amount of commentary did anything other than but upset them that someone was watching them drive into a concrete wall and knowing it. In other words, it seemed to upset them more that someone knew what was going on than that the wall was being hit. And that was irrational. But thirdly, these were very intelligent women. One was a psychotherapist, millionaire, award-winning author, experience with 100 lovers, interpersonal growth, doing lots of workshops, whatever. So when you see this pattern, in 30 different partners, in its every area is different. You know, it's one time it's a train, another time they fall asleep immediately you bring a topic up. Well, that's clear. They don't want to deal with the topic. So then the question is, well, why don't you want to deal with this topic? Oh, I do. So then the question is, why don't you want to say why you don't want to deal with the topic? Now, watching these women turn into desperation, grief, horror, panic, you know, they would look like caged animals sometimes. You know, it's like, I'm asking you why you fell asleep for the 40th time when I bring up this topic. And no, I'm not going to believe that you really want to talk about it. You want to talk about it right now? Of course. What's your new excuse? You know, why don't you want to talk about it? Oh, of course you can't talk about it. You want to talk about it now? 2 p.m.? And now you're silent. Now you're looking like a caged animal again. What is so terrifying to a personally growth-oriented person about any of this? And if you're terrified, what's so terrifying about telling me you're terrified? Oh, I'm not terrified. You're not terrified? So, okay, let's talk about it. I can't. You know, and so if you're paying attention, you will have noticed this either in yourself or in someone else. The question is, what's going on? Why on earth would a normally intelligent person just flat out lie to you about, and lie to themselves about the most obvious thing in the world? Now, I would just get fed up and leave, because it just felt like such a mockery. You know, what I heard was, Dane, we think you're so dumb that you can't figure out the most basic lie that we're telling to keep you out, just to upset you, you know, for no apparent reason, because we don't want to solve this issue that is damaging the relationship, because we don't care about the relationship. So we're just going to lie to you and cover it up. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not going to lie to it and cover it up. And what I would find, even in some cases, I would give these women the choice to end the relationship or deal with it. And they'd end the relationship after begging me, don't end it, da, 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 da. And so this is an irrationality, number one, and it's an irrational irrationality, meaning how they're dealing with the irrationality is irrational. Because if you say, okay, I'm absolutely terrified, I don't know why, but I am absolutely terrified, so I can't talk about this, that's rational. Because, okay, you're feeling a wave of terror, and it's true, you aren't dealing with this, and so that's why you're not dealing with it. Okay, that's rational. But to say, I want to deal with it, when the body is freaking out and doing everything imaginable to not deal with it, and then not dealing with it when there's absolutely no one stopping you to deal with it but you, that's irrational irrationality. This is the domain that I want to talk about, because this used to just terrify me, and I had no idea what's going on. And I started finding it myself from time to time. Like, there was a job site where I would go to that job site and I would physically freeze. And it was only at that job site, number one, and only when I was alone. So this drove me nuts. So I had to start going to the job site with people. I wasn't irrational about the irrationality. I didn't know what was going on. I was freezing in this particular context. I didn't know it was trauma, because I didn't understand that fight, flight, freeze directly correlates to trauma. So what I'm going to suggest is that you look for any area in yourself or partner that is irrationally irrational. And I'm going to suggest that people are so desperate to deal with these irrational, to avoid dealing with these irrational areas, that they are going to do almost anything to pretend that it's rational. They're going to make up this excuse and this. So I think it helps to spend at least 4 hours a day to someone. If you want to do a deep, growthful relationship, spend at least 4 hours a day together, at least 3, and track stuff. Track the patterns. Because over here, your partner will say, I'm going to do this, and she does it. And over here, they're going to say, I don't like this, and they don't do it. It's symmetrical. I don't like it, I don't do it. I'm going to do this, I did it. I say I want to be a good author, so I write. So there's all correlation. You've got integration. But then there's going to be this one area where they're absolutely passionate not to look at it, not to talk about it, number one, and then they're equally passionate not to talk about why they don't want to talk about it and to pretend that there's no area there. And that's the area that I want you to pay attention to in yourself and in someone else. Now, most of us are so committed to keeping this unconscious because we've gotten the message as a baby growing up. This is our trauma avoidance strategy. We've gotten the message as the baby that if we deal with this trauma, we'll die. Because it was such a big emotion. Maybe it was our parents' flash of rage at us or hatred towards us because we inconvenienced them at a key moment. And we're just 2 years old, and all we knew was they wanted to kill us. And we saw it in the eye, we felt it in the energy, we heard it in the tone of voice, and we knew whatever we were doing, we were terrible, and they wanted to kill us, and it was our fault. And we can't possibly go back there again because we'll die. Okay, so that's locked in at 2 years old. Before language, you don't remember the look, you don't remember what you were doing, you were crying at someone's meeting, you don't even remember you were there in a meeting. So these traumas are stored within our memory and our biology. And memory is associative, like a certain smell will remind you that you made love in a haystack, or with this person, or a certain smell will remind you of your childhood in the grass. Now, when associative phenomena comes up, like for sexual abuse survivors, it can be getting near foreplay or something like that. When something brings up the memory unconsciously, meaning you get close to it emotionally, there wasn't language, so you didn't spell it out, but you just get close to that part of your emotional reservoir and that part of your biology where that memory is stored. The alert comes back, the memory, not of what happened or why, but the memory, stay away from here or you die, comes up. It comes up. Number 2, you don't know why, and it's not logical. Now, we filter out, because we're logical thinkers, we filter out what's not logical. So we get the emotional instinct, stay away or you die, but logically we're not registering at all because in part we're staying away. That's how we protect the consciousness. So when you get this message, stay away or you die, you try and avoid the area. Like if you were walking in towards the TV and the movie was there, you turn around suddenly and you remember you need to get some tonic water in the fridge. Your partner says, hey, where are you going? And you say, somewhere, I need something. Now, an observant partner that follows you and says, well, where are you coming? Are you going to come back? No, I don't want to. Well, what went on? Well, nothing went on. Well, yes, you said you're really interested in this movie. I put it on just for you. As you're 10 feet away from the door and you walk away. What's going on? Do you not want to watch the movie? Have you suddenly disliked movie? Why did you ask? What's going on? And they will not be able to give a coherent response because it's getting too near to that area of trauma. Now, here's the way. Well, first of all, what's important to understand is that compulsion is an adaptive trauma coping strategy. The compulsion to lie, the compulsion to cheat, the compulsion to forget something, the compulsion to never compliment your partner, the compulsion to always compliment, the compulsion not to look at the fact that they're cheating on you, the compulsion to do something that is not rational is a trauma coping strategy. And it will correlate with when you got the message that you were bad and you're going to die if you continue doing X, Y, and Z. Because if your parent keeps hating you that way and you're dependent on them at 1-year-old, 2-year-old, etc., you're dead. Every infant gets that instinct. And the heart is more open when we're young, not less. So this is a trauma coping strategy. Now, each pocket is bigger than the self. It's bigger than the conscious sense of self. It's not bigger than the self. It's bigger than the conscious sense of self. Because when you're 2-year-old, anything that could kill you feels bigger than you are. It's too big to deal with. How do you deal with the fact that your protector wants to kill you and you're 2 years old? How do you deal with the fact that you know exactly what you saw in their face? Hatred and rage. You don't know why, and you don't know that it's not your fault. You get that it is your fault, and the reason is because you're bad. Now, when you've got a pocket of that happening over here, and another pocket of it over here, another pocket over here, another pocket here, and many of these are pre-language, you can't face them alone, first of all. You need help. Secondly, you need to anticipate them, and you need to do trauma literacy. You need to read a book. The Body Keeps the Score. YouTube, Audible, read the book. Learn about biology in the brain. Learn about how these things work. You need to understand the perspective of a child, which has been disowned in this culture. Alice Miller, For Your Own Good. Read the perspective of a child, which is not designed for modern culture, number one, and is not designed for our level of sociopathic dissociation from children, a Western phenomenon in the last 1,000 years, not common in an Amazon tribe or something where there's a deep bonding. Now, if you understand that a trauma is bigger than the conscious mind can deal with alone, that this means you need help, that you need to have some trauma literacy, that you need to be looking for fight, flight, freeze patterns, you can then get help. And you can start mapping out those areas where you are irrationally irrational and where you start fighting, freezing, or running in a way that doesn't make any sense. These are the areas that are going to alert you to the fact when you're doing something that doesn't make sense, that is a freeze. I can't speak. I know I should say something. I know. She walked by. Because being rejected would feel devastating, would feel traumatizing, humiliating, would tell me that I'm not good enough and I'll never be loved, whatever it is. I'm in traumatic terrain. I'm associating this date with my life in some way that's pre-verbal. Then you can start identifying these pockets. Now, one of the best ways we hide them is we create lives that are very boring lives that are in our comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with being in your comfort zone, but when we design everything about our lives, for example, if we're freezing and we just create a big TV and never move except when we have to go to work, and then we come home and we freeze and watch and then fall asleep on the TV. Now, this may seem like luxury, but the reality is we're never facing our life and we're never dealing with all the traumas that come up around that we would otherwise feel that panic with and not have an escape. And then we would get to work to heal and understand the underlying trauma. So it's good to expose ourselves to a wide variety of situations. It's also good to practice different trauma coping mechanisms. Now, you will fight, flight, or freeze when you're in trauma, but if you normally freeze, why don't you try fighting? If you normally fight, why don't you try running? If you normally fight, why don't you try freezing? If you do the thing you don't normally do with trauma, you will also help to bring consciousness to areas that are stuck. Finally, knowing you need help, look for a licensed trauma therapist who is familiar with one, constellation therapy, family constellation therapy. Number 2, EMDR. Now, you'll learn about this in The Body Keeps the Score. Number 3 is emotional, cares about you and your safety, is not dissociative with their own feelings and with you. And look for a partner who is trauma literate. Trauma literate partner means they have to read the book and talk about it. And you can start when you behave irrationally saying, oh, I'm starting to freeze right here, I'm in trauma. Your partner will know what to do. How can I help? How can I support you? You want to see how emotionally old you are. How old are you? I feel 3 years old and I can't talk and I can't move. Ah, okay, so you have a trauma at 3 years old that's being triggered. What's it being triggered by? It's being triggered by, as you get close to me right now, there's a look in your eye that says you're angry with me. I see. And what is your 3-year-old afraid of that anger? You're going to kill me. I'm going to die. Okay, so you're afraid, your 3-year-old's afraid that I'm going to kill her because I'm angry. Is that it? Yes. Okay, so thank you so much. How can I support you? Do you want a hug? Do you want a space? Do you want to draw it? What do you want to do? How do you want to get it out? And this, of course, a pretty sophisticated person that can explain this, but that's what you get from practicing trauma, becoming a little bit literate. It's no different than typing. You can't just sit down at a typewriter and type 60 words per minute. You have to practice. You can't just fly a plane. You have to go to school to fly a plane. You can't just handle trauma that our culture has conveniently forgotten and shamed. You gotta do a little bit of studying. It takes a few hours. Not as long as it takes to type 60 words a minute. What's more important? Your marriage, your life, your emotional literacy, or your typing skills. So when you have this, when you're looking out for irrational irrationality, when you're looking out for fight, flight, and freeze, when you're trauma literate and you have some options, you can start doing various forms of clearing. The emotional freedom technique is another thing that some people have found useful. EMDR is particularly powerful. So that's a response. Now, what you will go through as the journey is, first of all, deny denial, meaning I'm not behaving irrationally. When you are, that's irrational. So that's the first wave. Okay, I am behaving irrationally. There's fight, flight, freeze. It's a freeze, and it's around this, it's around this, and it's around this. Next comes the emotional clearing, which requires a very safe, healthy environment, a safe, healthy partner who puts your feelings first, an EMDR session, a constellation in the family. You need something that's safe and healthy for that. Then will come a wave of emotion. You'll understand and feel the terror. You may not remember the incident, but you'll feel it, and you'll hold it and release it and bring safety and security, bring love, give the terror to a higher power, see where it wants to flow to get the emotional charge down to a point where the conscious ego can deal with it. This is the key step to take it out of the traumatic arena. Once your conscious mind can deal with it and feel that emotion consciously and understand its source, then you can you can let the support network down, and now you're going to deal with an irrational thing, like, oh my God, scary movies bring up this type of memory, and I don't want to watch a scary movie, so I'm not going to do it. Rationality. Okay, great. then you either avoid that area or you clear it to a point where I have no more fear about that. I'm going to clear my phobia of snakes by spending some time with snakes, and okay, no big deal anymore. So this is the process to moving through trauma in couplehood. But the biggest thing that I want to understand is that when you've got a weight that is this hard and big, you cannot deal with it alone. It's very much like a 1-ton weight here and you're here. You can't use willpower directly to get this up off the ground. You've got to A, move the fulcrum over, that's your support. B, you may have to compartmentalize this a little bit. Thirdly, you may need additional support and weight here. Fourthly, you're going to need strategy, and you're going to need to partner with your unconscious. Trauma is bigger than the conscious mind, as every fear of dying is. And as a result, it needs a ritual of some kind. EMDR is a ritual, family constellation is making a mask and then burning it. There's an engagement with the unconscious mind, which is bigger than the conscious mind. We know a tiny bit of ourselves in the universe. 99.9% of what's out there we don't know. It's in the unconscious mind. It's there, but we're not conscious of it. And we need to partner with things in that domain to succeed with trauma. Now, the unknown itself is terrifying to people who are trauma survivors, because that's what hit them. It came out of the unknown. Their life was endangered, and they didn't expect it because it was unknown. And so the biggest fear most people have is the unknown. But the healing of trauma also happens in an unknown arena, and frequently requires some form of meditation or partnering with an unseen friend, be that an angel, be that a higher self, be that some kind of a deity that's sacred to us. We need to ask for help so that their protection and their power, bigger than the individual ego, can help us face this feel. Because if the terror was at 2 years old, and the reason it feels like 1 ton is that at 2 years old, the full rage of our parents did feel like it was a ton. We will not be able to face it without being able to face a terror that is equivalent to what seems like a full ton weight to a 2-year-old. And that requires a lot of safety, security, confidence in the biology, and understanding what's going on. And the key thing to understand is that when these are biologically locked in place, the body sends messages of terror and warning to the brain saying, don't go in here, or we'll die. And at an intensity that the conscious mind cannot override. The conscious mind cannot force itself into a suicide mission when it doesn't want to die. It just becomes irrational about its irrational behavior to participate in the protection and not look too close at it. So anyway, I hope that helps, and we absolutely need support group. Therapy, unseen friends are wonderful if you can have a close relationship of some kind with a higher power. But with something bigger than we are, heavier than we are, that's a little bit out there beyond our conscious mind, we need help to deal with it. When we do, we integrate, we become healthier, we become more sane. Good luck.